Heya Cryptozens, it's 10 p.m. Pacific time. My name is Nikodemus, and welcome back to the Crypto Overnighter, where we take a nightly look at the crypto, NFT, and metaverse space. And keep in mind, nothing in this show should ever be considered financial advice. Hey everyone, it's 10 p.m. on a Thursday, November 17th, 2022. Diet Friday. Okay, on with the show. One of the tactics that debt collectors use is to tell the debtor, I don't care where you get the money, make sure you pay us first. Even if you have to borrow the money from someone else, you make sure you pay us first. Which makes sense, right? You know this guy isn't making the best choices financially speaking necessarily, and you want to make sure that you're taken care of in case the money runs out. The island nation of the Bahamas is a lot like you, and in a way I get it. Assuming what FTX is saying is true, that is. Because the crypto exchange is accusing the government of the Bahamas of directing unauthorized transactions from FTX's systems to withdraw assets. This was after the company filed for Chapter 11 in the United States. So the document was filed in U.S. bankruptcy court for the District of Delaware. And this filing asks for the transfer of the case to Delaware. They said to, quote, end the chaos, so that all of the proceedings can take place in a single venue. Because this is messy, right? This thing has some 130-odd companies involved. Estimates are 1 million creditors. In their filing, they said they have, quote, credible evidence that the Bahamian government is responsible for directing unauthorized access to the debtors' systems for the purpose of obtaining digital assets, adding, it appears the automatic stay has been flaunted by a government actor, no less. Because when bankruptcy is filed, that's supposed to freeze all the assets. That's the protection that they're talking about until they can be divvied up between the creditors. FTX Trading is an Antiguan company that filed for bankruptcy in the United States. They want to have the entire thing held in a single court as well. They said, quote, having two bankruptcy courts consider related issues simply makes no sense. It would result in potentially inconsistent opinions, duplication of efforts, and unnecessary expense. In terms of the celebrity of Mr. Bankman-Fried, his unconventional leadership style, his incessant and disruptive tweeting since the petition date, and the almost complete lack of dependable corporate records, these Chapter 11 cases are unprecedented. And we're going to talk about Sam's tweets here in a minute. But for now, the accusation was filed in response to a complaint filed in a New York court, one filed by the court-appointed Bahamian Liquidators. And remember, we talked about the Bahamas Supreme Court. They appointed these provisional liquidators. Now, Brian Sims is one of those liquidators, and Mr. Sims has objections. He submitted a court filing that because FTX is domiciled in the Bahamas, that means FTX wasn't able to file for bankruptcy in the United States. Further, he said, quote, he rejects the validity of any purported attempt to place FTX affiliates in bankruptcy. Now, he didn't go quite so far as to ask for the court to dismiss the U.S. bankruptcy proceedings. That said, he did request that the court recognize that the Bahamia's legal actions were valid. He said that this could impact proceedings for other FTX-controlled entities. So for Sims and what he's arguing, it comes down to this. FTX Markets is the parent company over all of the other companies, which, according to him, means that all of the companies in the empire belong to FTX Digital Markets. He said, quote, despite the seemingly complex structure of the FTX brand companies, the entire FTX brand was ultimately operated from a single location, the Bahamas. All core management personnel, likewise, were located in the Bahamas. And so what he's asking for here is provisional relief. They want recognition of the Bahamian legal proceedings thus far, and they want FTX's U.S.-based assets transferred over to those court-appointed liquidators. He wants authorization for, quote, urgent discovery measures, and they want to make sure none of FTX's assets are transferred, encumbered, or otherwise disposed of. And all of this comes after he and other liquidators filed for Chapter 15 protection on behalf of FTX Digital Markets. That filing went in on Tuesday. Now, Chapter 15 protections are usually used in cross-border operations. And so these liquidators are claiming signs of, quote, serious fraud and mismanagement. This is according to filings made late Wednesday. The group filed their document in the U.S. Bankruptcy Court of the Southern District of New York, which is why documents were filed to get everything done under the Bankruptcy Court of Delaware, so that there would only be one court involved. In their filing, they said, quote, the joint provisional liquidators' filings to date indicate that serious fraud and mismanagement may have been committed. And so their filing is to prevent any assets of being disposed of until the courts make a final decision on whether or not to grant Chapter 15 bankruptcy protection. Because there have been reports that Alameda Research owes FTX something like $10 billion. They said those reports were, quote, essentially confirming that FTX brand's management misused customer deposits on the FTX digital asset exchange to extend undisclosed loans to Alameda. They also brought up that $500 million loan that they made to Voyager as well. And so with all this in mind, an official notice from the Bahamas Securities Commission said that SBF is possibly facing criminal proceedings. Now, the Bahamas and their liquidators are not the only ones interested in the quality of leadership exhibited at FTX. John Ray had some things to say about the way the company was run, and he also had some things to say about SBF's latest antics. This was after Sam took 40 hours or so to type out what happened, tweeted that out across 9 different tweets. SBF also said that FTX's leverage was around $13 billion. Not the $5 billion that he originally thought. Enter Mr. John J. Ray III. Now, he took over as CEO when Sam filed for bankruptcy, and he has a reputation for having been the guy who shepherded Enron through their bankruptcy and settlement proceedings. At the time, the largest corporate bankruptcy in U.S. history. And so his reaction to Sam's antics were pretty subdued, really. He didn't point and laugh. It was in a tweet on Wednesday that he did say, quote, Mr. Bankman-Fried has no ongoing role at FTX, FTX US, or Alameda Research Limited, and does not speak on their behalf. But that's not all Mr. Ray had to say. In a series of filings in that Delaware bankruptcy court, he characterized SBF's management as unprecedentedly poor. Now keep in mind, this is the Enron guy. He saw the ugly, unvarnished truth of Enron from the inside out. He knows corporate rot. And so he called out a myriad of things, including a lack of experience among senior management, the practice of using company money to buy real estate in the Bahamas, and their poor to non-existent record keeping. His filing said, quote, never in my career have I seen such a complete failure of corporate controls and such a complete absence of trustworthy financial information as occurred here. And then he went on. From compromised systems integrity and faulty regulatory oversight abroad to the concentration of control in the hands of a very small group of inexperienced, unsophisticated, and potentially compromised individuals, the situation is unprecedented. Now, remember, we're talking about around 130 companies in this empire. And from what Ray is saying, they have little to no regard for how corporations handle things. He said FTX didn't use the appropriate accounting or security controls for their digital assets. He said that they used unsecured shared email accounts to store private keys. He said that as of November 11th, FTX could not provide a list of their employees. And the crazy train didn't stop there. Oh no. Ray cited the use of software to hide their, quote, misuse of corporate funds. He said that they failed to reconcile their blockchain positions daily. And he also criticized their lack of independent governance. Alameda should have been treated independently from the other companies in the empire. In fact, it was this very lack of separation between FTX and Alameda that kicked off this crisis over concerns of how they were commingling funds to begin with. And as it turns out, this was entirely inappropriate since they were using customer funds in their attempt to bail out Alameda Research. And further, the FTX group in the Bahamas used corporate funds. They were used to purchase homes and other things for employees and advisors. They were purchased, they were assigned to staff personally, but there is no record of any employee having to pay the company back. In the meantime, Washington, D.C. wants answers. two U.S. senators, but known to be downright unfriendly to crypto, Elizabeth Warren, Democrat from Massachusetts, and Dick Durbin, Democrat from Illinois. They sent a couple of letters this week, one to SBF and the other to the guy we were just talking about, John J. Ray. In those letters, the senators make it clear they want to know what caused FTX's collapse. And like I said, they are no friends of crypto. They're not here to make the world a better place for crypto. They said FTX's collapse justifies their, quote, long-standing concerns that the crypto industry is built to favor scammers and designed to reward insiders and to defraud mom-and-pop investors. Which is interesting, because there's some past history here. SBF's father, Joseph Bankman, was a donor to Warren's campaign. In fact, he helped her draft the 2016 Tax Simplification Act, so they're well known to each other. You got to really screw up for a friend of the family to publicly call you out like Warren is calling out SBF. And so it appears that this letter marks the beginning of their investigation into FTX and Alameda Research, as well as Sam and his close associates and fellow executives. They're being accused of fraud, among other things, and they say all this, quote, appears to be an appalling case of greed and deception. They continued, one thing is clear. The public is owed a complete and transparent accounting of the business practices and financial activities leading up to and following FTX's collapse and the loss of billions of dollars of customer funds. And so, as is common with these types, they're demanding answers. This means that by November 28th, the senators expect information and documents on FTX. They want information on the subsidiaries. They want to know why they were going to buy Voyager Digital. They want to know about Sam's back door that he built so he can move funds around without leaving a trail. They want to know what caused the liquidity crisis to begin with. This means historical data, detailing FTX's transfers to Alameda Research, as well as the relationship between the two companies. They want details on the alleged hack that occurred on November 11th. The one that now sees that the hacker now has the 35th largest bag of Ethereum. And they want to know what a lot of people want to know. What happened to the missing customer funds? I'm not sure that they're going to be content with waiting around for SBF to provide those answers, because they've copied in Chair Gary Gensler of the Securities Exchange Commission, as well as Rostin Benham, Chair of the Commodity Future Trading Commission. Both were CC'd on the letter. Now, we were just talking about Sam's father, Joseph Bankman. Well, a friend of Sam's dad will now be taking part. See, Joseph teaches law at Stanford University. He's friends with a guy named David Mills. David Mills is a white-collar crime professor at Stanford. Well, he's going to be replacing counsel from Paul Weiss, Rifkind, Wharton, and Garrison. And this was just less than a week after Sam hired them. Now, the thing to keep in mind here is that despite all of the drama floating about, Sam has not been charged with anything yet. That said, the Justice Department, the U.S. SEC, and the U.S. CFTC have all opened investigations into his actions, as have regulators from Texas, California, and a number of other states. And finally, it became official. The Republicans now control one half of Congress. The results of the 2020 midterm elections on November 8th have put 218 House seats under Republican control. This means they now have a majority in the House of Representatives. And while this wasn't a surprise, they did not win by anywhere near the anticipated margin. So what does this have to do with crypto? I expect lobbyists and PACs to respond to a divided government by focusing on just a few bills and getting us seats on a few key committees. The lack of support from one side or the other may well keep new crypto legislation from being proposed. Instead, we might see previously presented bills like the DCCPA and the Lummis-Gillibrand bill being rehashed during this upcoming session. The DCCPA, however, might be DOA due to SBF. Now, this means that Republicans will again control the agenda of the House Financial Services Committee as well as the House Ag Committee. Representative Patrick McHenry is expected to take over the HFSC. He's already elbow deep in legislation meant to establish rules for stablecoins. Now, he's been partnering with Democrat Representative Maxine Waters. Both are confident that this bipartisan bill will eventually be passed. And then Representative Glenn Thompson. He's the ranking Republican on the Ag panel. And if you've been listening to this show for a while, you know that the Ag Committee is important because they oversee the CFTC. And so they have their own bill, the Digital Commodity Exchange Act, which is meant to be a broader framework of rules for the industry. So this new batch of legislators will take over on January 3rd, and we'll see what they do then. And I want to thank you for joining me on a Thursday night, because when you stop listening, I will stop talking. We'll see you tomorrow night.